Rome did not fall the way movies teach us to expect. There was no single night of fire, no final battle that ended everything, no dramatic moment where the world suddenly realized it was over. Instead, the fall of Rome was something far more dangerous and far more familiar. It was slow, gradual, and easy to ignore. For centuries, the Roman Empire had been the backbone of the Western world. Its roads connected continents, its laws governed millions of people who'd never met, its economy moved grain, gold, and soldiers across thousands of miles, and its army was the most powerful fighting force Earth had ever seen. Yet by the 4th and 5th centuries, that same empire was quietly breaking down from the inside, stretched too wide to control its borders, drained by constant warfare, and weakened by political instability that turned leadership into a revolving door of short-lived emperors. Corruption became normal, loyalty was bought instead of earned, and the idea of serving the state slowly faded as survival became more important than citizenship. Rome was still standing, but it was no longer functioning the way it once had, and when pressure came from the outside in the form of migrating tribes and invading forces, the empire lacked the unity and trust it once relied on to respond. By the time the Western Roman emperor was removed from power in 476 AD, most ordinary people barely noticed, because for them, Rome had already stopped feeling like Rome. What followed was not immediate collapse, but fragmentation, a massive system without a center. Roman administrators disappeared, tax collection failed, long-distance trade collapsed, and cities that had once depended on imperial supply chains began to shrink or empty altogether. Life became local, dangerous, and uncertain. And into this unstable world stepped groups the Romans had long labeled barbarians, Goths, Franks, Vandals, and others. But their arrival did not mean total destruction, because these groups did not come to erase Rome, they came to replace it, and they inherited an empire already falling apart. They occupied Roman cities, ruled former Roman provinces, and adopted Roman customs because Rome's systems, even broken, were still the most effective way to govern large populations. Yet without a central authority to hold everything together, Western Europe slowly transformed into a patchwork of regional powers, where control depended on land, military strength, and personal loyalty rather than law and citizenship. And while the Western Roman Empire faded into memory, its collapse did not mean the end of Roman influence. It marked the beginning of a long transition that would reshape Europe and quietly prepare the foundations of the modern Western world.
Rome, after the fall, did not become an empty wasteland, but it did become a world without direction, and that loss of direction changed everything, because without a central Roman authority to enforce law, protect borders, or maintain infrastructure, Western Europe entered a long period where survival mattered more than progress. Roads that had once carried armies and trade fell into disrepair. Cities that had depended on Roman grain shipments shrank into fortified towns, and money slowly disappeared from daily life as people returned to bartering goods and services. Literacy declined, not because people became less intelligent, but because schools, libraries, and administration no longer had state support. Knowledge became rare, local, and fragile, passed orally or preserved by a few who understood its value. Power shifted away from institutions and toward individuals who could offer protection. Landowners with armed followers became local rulers, and this is how feudalism was born, a system where loyalty replaced citizenship and protection replaced law. Yet even in this fractured world, Rome was not truly gone. Roman law survived in simplified forms. Roman borders still shaped kingdoms, and Roman identity lingered in language, customs, and memory. While Western Europe struggled to rebuild, the Eastern Roman Empire continued to thrive, centered in Constantinople, richer, more organized, and more stable than anything in the West. The Eastern Empire preserved ancient Greek and Roman texts, refined legal systems, and maintained complex administration for centuries after Rome fell in the West, acting as a bridge between the ancient and modern worlds. And at the same time, Christianity rose as the most powerful unifying force left behind by Rome's collapse. The church filled the vacuum where imperial authority had once stood, offering structure, education, and moral order. Monasteries became centers of learning, copying and protecting texts that would otherwise have been lost. Bishops became political figures, and faith replaced Roman citizenship as the shared identity across Europe. This new order was slower, weaker, and more divided than the Roman Empire had been, but it was not dead. It was adapting, learning to survive without centralized power. And this long transformation reshaped Europe into a continent of kingdoms instead of provinces, castles instead of cities, and local loyalties instead of imperial unity, setting the stage for centuries of conflict, innovation, and gradual recovery, all while Rome's influence continued to shape the world quietly from the shadows, waiting for the moment when its ideas would be rediscovered and reinterpreted by future generations.
As centuries passed, Europe slowly began to stabilize, and with stability came memory, because once people were no longer fighting just to survive, they started looking backward to understand what had been lost. And in that search, Rome returned, not as an empire of armies and emperors, but as an idea, preserved in law codes, architecture, language, and half-forgotten books hidden in monasteries in Byzantine libraries. And when Europe entered the Renaissance, thinkers did not see Rome as a fallen civilization to be mourned, they saw it as a guide to be studied. Roman engineering showed how large societies could function. Roman law showed how order could exist beyond personal power. And Roman political history showed both the brilliance and danger of concentrated authority. These rediscovered ideas spread slowly at first, then rapidly, reshaping European thought and weakening the absolute power of kings. And when Europeans crossed the Atlantic into a new continent, they carried Rome with them in their minds, especially those who would later build the United States, because the American founders were obsessed with Rome's story, not its emperors, but its republic. They studied how Rome balanced power, how it collapsed into dictatorship, and how citizens lost control when ambition replaced accountability. And those lessons directly shaped the American political system: the Senate, written laws, checks and balances, fear of tyranny, and the belief that a republic could only survive if its citizens remained engaged. Rome, after the fall, became a warning carved into history, showing that a nation can be powerful, wealthy, and advanced, yet still collapse if trust between the people and the state erodes. And this is why Rome's story resonates so strongly with American audiences, because it does not feel distant or ancient, it feels familiar. Rome fell when inequality widened, when elites disconnected from ordinary citizens, and when the idea of shared responsibility weakened. Yet Rome also proved that ideas can survive even when governments fail. Its legal systems influenced modern courts, its political concepts inspired revolutions, and its cultural legacy shaped the Western world, meaning Rome did not end in 476 AD, it transformed, and that transformation continues to influence how modern nations understand power, freedom, and collapse, making Rome not just a chapter in history, but a living lesson that still matters today. Rome's true legacy is not found in ruins or dates on a timeline, but in the patterns it left behind. Because after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the world learned that collapse does not erase influence, it redistributes it. Rome lost its armies, its emperors, and its centralized power, but its ideas proved stronger than its borders, spreading through law, culture, religion, and political thought, shaping the foundations of the modern Western world, especially the United States, which inherited Rome's warnings as much as its inspirations. Rome showed that no civilization is immune to decline, that strength without unity is fragile, and that citizens who stop believing in their institutions eventually stop defending them. Yet Rome also demonstrated that knowledge preserved, systems adapted, and values remembered can outlive any empire. The medieval world rose from Rome's ruins, the Renaissance rose from Rome's memory,
and modern democracies rose from Rome's lessons, making Rome after the fall not a story of failure, but a story of transformation, continuity, and responsibility. Because the fall of Rome did not end civilization, it challenged future societies to learn from it, to recognize the signs of decay before it becomes irreversible, and to understand that history is not a warning shouted once, but a quiet message repeated across centuries, waiting to be taken seriously by those who believe their world will last forever.